Oversight Committee meeting. I'm going to ask Senator Billy Hickman if he will open us in a word of prayer. And he said we needed lots of prayer, so I'm going to say give us lots of prayer. We need it for what we're doing. So, okay, what number are you there? You're number 8. Let's give you a voice. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, what a great day you've given us, Lord. You just give us an opportunity to represent the great people of Georgia. Lord, sometimes we feel like our boat is just so full of water, Lord, but you always come by and provide the bucket to dip it out, Lord, and you find a way to lead us down the right path, and we thank you for that. Lord, we ask you to watch over this committee meeting today, Lord. Just give us the wisdom and guidance that we can always honor you. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Let's see. I'm looking here in order. I don't see anything, but I do see a great senator and Senator Lindsey Tippins. I'm going to just let you go right ahead, even though there were others ahead of you. You're here and on time, and so we're going to give you that opportunity. Is that fair? Very brief. We appreciate the brevity. And so let's see. Let me give you a microphone. There you go. And so you are all ready to go, so we're ready to listen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring you Senate Bill 519. You've seen this bill before, but it had a different bill number on it. Last year it was Senate Bill 120. What this bill does is create the honorary office of the Solicitor General Emeritus of the state of Georgia. There are no costs involved in this, hidden or otherwise. It's patterned after an identical bill for the honorary district attorney bill. It does mandate a particular term of service people have to serve in these offices to be recognized as Solicitor General Emeritus. It passed last year, I think unanimously, both in committee and also on the floor. If it wasn't unanimous, it was very close. It was stopped in the House. They needed a vehicle for an ethics bill, and so it got sidelined last year. It's an identical bill, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. At the appropriate time. Okay. We have a second. We got a second. Okay. That makes that pretty easy. Any further discussion? There's none. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Okay.
Thank you very
You're
much
off,
for
sir.
those
Take
hard
off.
questions that always makes a bill better.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, dude. All right. We are looking. Okay. Give her a second. She's dressed appropriately in the right colors. Okay. You want to do that? Well, let's okay. Let's go ahead and take this.
Is she here?
Let's see. Senator Davenport here? Don't see her? Okay. Well, okay. We will change a little order of the batting order since all the players are not here, and we'll make it happen that way. Senator Summers, you are on deck, and we welcome you. You'll put you right here in the batter's butt. Yeah. You're up to bat, even though we missed.
Come on up, guys.
We missed you on the kickball side yesterday. So come.
I should have been there, but I was working the bill, Mr.
Okay. Very good. Well, welcome. And have we got 2 mics up there, or just both of those?
It's the same one.
Same one. Okay, so we got sound on both of them. All right, Senator.
Ready, Mr. Chairman?
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'll introduce Jared Meyer and Judge Glock. Judge Glock's from Austin, Texas, and Jared Meyer from D.C., as in Washington. And I'm trying to get both of them to move to the great state of Georgia, where they can have a good life. But they're with the Cicero Foundation, and they're here to help answer any questions we may have on trying to eradicate homelessness in Georgia, especially in the big cities. And that's what we're here to talk about. Okay. And our bill is Senate Bill 535, and it's a LC 339065S.
Okay.
LC 339065S.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, what this bill does is it's designed, if you want to do something about homelessness in the state of Georgia, and especially in our big cities, that's what this bill is about. I don't know if any of you ride up and down the road in Atlanta that don't live up here during session, but when you ride up and down the road in Atlanta, anywhere within a 2-mile radius of this capital, homelessness is out of control. It's literally out of control. I've made a point to ride around, before I get to detail in this bill, I made a point to ride around almost every night and take 30 minutes and just drive a different route and count the homeless people on the street, living in the corners, living in the edges, living on the sidewalks, living under bridges. If you were to take your off the road and run off the road, you'd wipe out 8 to 10 people. It's just that bad in the city of Atlanta. And so what we've done here is the Cicero Institute has basically done this. I want these guys to be able to answer any questions that you may have. But this has been done now in several big states. Austin, for one, Colorado, has been done in Colorado, Texas, Colorado, and of course LA. And this has worked. This has worked. And what it does is it basically gives accountability that we don't have any at this point in time that we need, accountability. And so we can go into any detail you want to go into it, and we can start going through the bill however you want to go through it. But I have these guys here. I know you're going to have questions you're going to ask me, and I'm sure there's people here who want to testify, obviously, against and for, hopefully. But, I mean, the reality of it is, Mr. Chairman, is homelessness in Georgia is out of control. And we want to do something about it to fix it, and we want to do it the right way and get it done. And that's what we're here for.
Okay. Okay, thank you. If you will, I'm just looking at a couple of things. Funding for all the activities on this bill, lobbying and things of that nature, where does that come from? Do you know?
My experts are here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Identify who you are and where you are, if you will. I know where you are, excuse me.
Yeah.
Who you're with, okay. I hope you know where you are.
It's, what time is it? 4
What time is it?
p.m.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, Jared Meyer, Executive Director of Cicero Action, which is a nonprofit advocacy organization that's based in Austin, Texas. We are founded and funded by a group of entrepreneurs who care about issues that have affected a lot of states and cities throughout our country. So we are not a vendor. We are purely a policy group that tries to bring best practices from some parts of the country and help solve problems that courageous leaders want to tackle in other parts of the country. So we do not make any money off of homelessness. In fact, everyone who donates to Cicero loses a lot of money by trying to bring some common sense reforms to this topic.
Since you mentioned Austin, Texas, I'll let you maybe comment. I'm assuming that this has possibly been used in that city. Is that or maybe a city that you have seen this used successfully at?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, last year Austin did some parts of this bill. I would say Georgia's bill is much better, and this is a more comprehensive reform that can really, within a year or two, if the money is spent right and the cities want to take on responsibility, make a major difference on what Senator Summers was discussing. And Judge can also, nationwide expert working on homelessness, researching this, he can fill in a little more on what this
Now,
is.
Judge is your first name, correct?
That is correct. Common source of confusion.
And you're-
I'm not actually a judge, much to my family's disappointment. But
now, your last name is Glock?
that is correct as well.
Spelled like the gun?
I always say when I'm south the Mason-Dixon line, I say like the gun. When I'm north, I say like clock with a G.
Wow, okay. Okay, I can tell this is going to be an interesting time. Okay, but Judge Glock really does sound authoritative, but nevertheless,
Thank you.
We'll let you speak, sir.
Hi, yes, thank you, my chairman. My name is Judge Glock. I'm with the Cicero Action, as Jared explained. So yes, last year Texas passed a bill, HB 1925, that would cut off funding to cities that refuse to take action on street sleeping and street camping. And although we have not had, unfortunately, a homelessness count in Austin since then to see what's happened, as a resident of then and someone who had a homelessness camp directly behind my house, I can say with confidence, as everyone in the city agrees, there has been a substantial reduction in homelessness. They have done this without any any arrests whatsoever. They have moved hundreds of people into housing and into shelters, and that's exactly what this does. Having the encouragement to local cities to move people off the streets into available services, shelters, and potentially sanctioned camping sites with security is clearly a better alternative than leaving people on the streets to die without any sort of security or services.
Okay. Let's say we were camping, all this committee was camping here, and you needed to move us to another location. Talk to us a little bit, just procedural, how that might be done.
Well, so as they usually do it when they have what they call a camping abatement in cities like Texas or in Phoenix or elsewhere, what they usually do is give plenty of warning to the people, offer them services or alternatives, and then say in 5 or 6 days we're going to come through and make sure that the tents are gone, the place is gone, and you have the option then to be transported wherever you need to be. That's exactly what most of these do, and that's how they do it. As I say, when they do these abatements in Austin, Texas, or as the senator mentioned in Colorado Springs, they don't result in arrests. The general goal is to only use that as a last resort. Absolutely need that sanction as a possibility to get individuals who are often in the midst of a drug crisis or a drug addiction or have severe mental illness to move on. But with having that in the back pocket, it allows people to help them move into a better circumstance. We've seen cities that do this. We've seen homelessness be reduced. We've seen more people going to treatment. We've seen reductions in homeless deaths. And we've seen the opposite when cities refuse to enforce street camping laws. We've seen an increase in deaths and violence, and I'd be happy to go more into the numbers on that as well.
Okay, committee members, questions? Number 8?
Number 6.
Number 6 or 8?
If you're telling me,
Coming this way. Okay, got you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
me? Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank y'all for being here. I'd just like to get y'all to clear up a couple of things for me personally. First of all, I'd like to make an observation. I had a guy from my hometown came in here today to meet with a bunch of people and all, and first words out of his mouth this morning was, I can't believe the homeless population in Atlanta. I can't believe the people on the streets and all. And go back to Senator Summers, I think we're all in that same situation. We just can't hardly believe it. And quite honestly, we're embarrassed over it. It's embarrassing. I don't know. I think it's very distractive, if that's a word, distracted to a very beautiful city. And we all have them. I'm from Statesboro, and we have that same situation going on. It seems like even in our town, it's growing and growing and growing. And our mayor, Mayor McCullough, is addressing the issue. How does it? I know this relates to government property. How does this affect? I see in this town, I see these tents on looks like private property. How do you go about moving those people off of the private properties?
So thank you very much, Senator. This affects two main sorts of things. One, it affects the state property, interstates and other areas, rights of way that are owned by the states, and makes it illegal to camp there. States such as Tennessee have recently passed this. They had recent problems with camps, and they realized they did not have a specific provision that allowed them to remove them. So it adds that provision to the state property. And then it says the state of Georgia will only continue to fund housing and public security to cities who are actually acting on their existing camping bans. So Atlanta, like most of the places, actually has laws against camping in place, but they're refusing to enforce them. And part of this does, like the bill in Texas did, is saying we're not going to continue to fund cities. We're not going to take action on this problem. We're not going to throw good money after bad. You're going to have to move someone into better circumstances. On private property, that is trespassing, and you have to deal with the individual property owner. But if the city takes action on this, I was in San Antonio Tuesday with some police officers in Texas, and they said if the city is willing to take action, like they are in San Antonio, they meet those property owners to find a way to make sure that they have the trespassing issues taken care of, and they can move the homeless individuals to a better circumstance.
Well, now, would those people be arrested and took to the jailhouse and spent the night in jail and all that kind of stuff?
No, so the goal in this is is not to criminalize homelessness. Again, you need to, Senator, thank you very much for the question, but the goal is not to criminalize homelessness. The goal in general is always to move people first to what's often a community court, a court that's going to emphasize drug or mental health treatment, and ideally even not go to those sort of courts, offer them the alternative services, and that's exactly what this bill says to do. And as it's been enforced in places like Austin or Colorado Springs, as I said before, it's never to use an arrest. They have not had any recorded arrest in those areas for the camping bans. It's merely to say, you have a law against this, so you can't stay in this particular property. We can offer you alternatives, but you have to move. You need that, both the stick and the carrot, and this bill provides those.
So it's not necessary just to move these people that are staying in these tents to other ground as tents. It's also to put them in some type of housing or something like that too?
Well, yes, as you've seen, we don't know the numbers we know that the numbers of homelessness in Atlanta proper went up dramatically in 2020. We know it was actually about a 33% increase.
Have you idea what that number would be in Atlanta?
Oh, Atlanta, well, the last time they had solid numbers on that, it was 1,000. This is back, it was the 950 roundabouts.
1,000.
This is back in 2020, though, and I don't doubt that everyone agrees the problem has gotten significantly worse since then.
Yeah.
We've not had a count of the homeless since that point because of COVID issues earlier. So the problem has gotten worse, but at the same time, we've seen an incredible decrease in the number of people in shelters. You've seen about a 40% decrease over 2020 and 2021, and the people staying in shelters. The goal of this is to move people off the streets, which is always the worst possible circumstance for someone, again, with a mental health crisis or with a drug addiction, and move them into some alternative, shelters or sanctioned camping areas.
There apparently has been some confusion too about some money that may be available through American Rescue Act, and we may lose those monies with this particular bill. Did you see that happening?
Senator, no, thank you for the question. No, there's $87 million going specifically to homelessness in the American Rescue Plan, and they offer 4 different alternatives for how you can spend it, including things like homelessness prevention, social services, and non-congregate shelters. This does not cut off any of that. The one thing it does say the city is going to refuse to use that money for is permanent supportive housing. Now, I haven't mentioned that before, but that's the main goal of a lot of current federal funding and many other funding streams. But permanent supportive housing is not the ideal way to solve homelessness, largely because it takes an obscene amount of time and it costs a lot of money. The city of Atlanta, in fact, had 1,300 unsheltered people in the streets back in 2014. Since then, they have added 1,300 new permanent units to their total thing. And has homelessness gotten better since 2014? No, it has not. We've seen many other states and cities who have done the same thing, who have built more permanent supportive housing units than every single unsheltered person in that state or that city, but have only seen homelessness increase. This is exactly what happened in San Francisco, and this is what happened in Arizona. And if I may add, Senator, many people opposed to this will say, no, the only solution to homelessness is more permanent supportive housing, and they will say it is evidence-based, and that is the only way to end homelessness is give people as many free and indefinite homes as humanly possible. But if you actually look at the National Academies of Science, our #1 scientific institution, 2018, said, quote, there is no substantial published evidence that permanent supportive housing improves the health of the homeless, let alone is cost effective. This is not the strategy Georgia should be taking. They should not be going down the path of San Francisco and LA and other things that are focused on permanent supportive housing. They should focus on that short-term service-provided shelters for people who are in crisis and not try to give every individual on the streets a free and indefinite home, because that will not solve homelessness.
You know, but also one of my biggest concerns all this, and we actually had this happen, I guess, when my wife and I came up here sometime last year, that actually people had urinated and defecated on, I guess that's the word, I don't know if that's the word or not, on the street, and we actually had to step over it in order to walk. And if we hadn't seen it, we'd have stepped in it, which would have been very, very bad. So there's all kind of problems that come with this, and then whatever we can do to these are great. These are probably very, very, very good people, and they need to be treated like human beings. But where they're living at now is not very humanly.
Thank you very much, Senator. I absolutely agree. And of course, there are problems with the communities, but what I want to emphasize this bill is absolutely essential for the homeless themselves. We know the statistics of the unsheltered homelessness. According to a recent UCLA study, 75% have a severe mental illness, 75% have a severe drug or alcohol addiction, and almost all have one or the other. Allowing addicted and mentally ill people to slowly kill themselves in the streets is not humane. We've seen what happens when enforcement actually happens. In Austin, when they stopped enforcement, the deaths among the homeless rose 40% in 1 year. When LA, for a short period from 2006 to 2014, was enforcing anti-camping ordinances on their Skid Row, they saw a reduction in violent crime by 40% and a reduction by 50% in homeless deaths. What happened when they stopped enforcing in 2015? Well, we've all seen the pictures on the news, and we've seen homeless deaths in LA almost triple. Enforcement in getting these people in the worst crisis of their lives off the street is the only humane thing to do. Leaving on them streets to slowly die, we've seen doesn't work elsewhere, and it's not working in Atlanta.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Senator Jackson,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, will you allow me a series of questions, please?
a series of questions. We've got more coming.
All right, that's great. I guess I'll just start with my first question is, where are you getting your figures around homelessness in Atlanta? Where are you getting these statistics?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Senator. It's from HUD. The HUD has both housing inventory counts that total all of the different shelter and permanent supportive housing units they have, and from the point-in-time count, which you're required to do, which cities and states are required to do once a year. As I said, the most recent point-in-time count for the unsheltered in Atlanta is back from 2020.
Let me just further, since you've taken some time to opine, I think I might do that by way of asking a question. So, first of all, you began by saying that permanent supportive housing is not the solution for people who are experiencing housing. But you also went on to state that many of the people who are sleeping outside today, currently in the city of Atlanta, are living with some type of mental illness and or drug addiction, oftentimes both together. But you still suggest that supportive housing is not the solution. So can you please help me understand and help us all understand, if supportive housing is not the solution for people who clearly need support, what is the solution?
Thank you very much, Senator. The solution is, one, requiring them to move off the streets, which is, again, a compassionate way to force people who are, I forget the exact pronunciation, agnosia, who don't understand their contemporary problems, to get treatment. And these services in short-term shelter. That is exactly what's helping people move on. The permanent supportive housing solution, it will take years to build these units, and they will always attract more individuals. There's a Journal of Housing Economics study from 2018 that showed that cities had to build at least 10 of these units to move a single individual off the streets. Why? Because, of course, when you offer free housing, there's always more people that go into the system. And again, as I mentioned, in other cities and places that have expanded these, we've seen no reduction of homelessness. And as I mentioned, the National Academy of Science does not think this permanent supportive housing helps people deal with these problems.
A further question. So first of all, let me be clear. I do this work, and I do this work in the city of Atlanta. And what I know to be true is that people come to Atlanta for services. So if you want to talk about the numbers not decreasing in Atlanta, it's because Atlanta is doing something right. People come from the Cordeals, from the Muskogees, from all the other places that you all represent. They come to Atlanta because they can receive services. Some of those services include supportive housing. I want to also make it clear that permanent supportive housing in Atlanta is not necessarily free. People are receiving SSI, people are working, and they're paying a portion of their rent in order to live there. It's not inherently free, and so that's just misinformation. But I need to ask questions because I know that's what I'm here to do. And so I would like for you to explain to me, how do you know that the people who are no longer homeless in the cities that you've referred to have not simply been pushed out to suburban areas? How do you know that they are not just somewhere else where they're receiving services? How do you know they did not get a Greyhound pass and be sent to Atlanta, which we know for a fact has happened multiple times? How do you know that that was not the consequence of the people who came from Austin and LA and these other places where they've made it illegal for people to sleep outside?
Thank you very much, Senator. So we know this from the point-in-time counts that I mentioned earlier. When the cities and the states do these point-in-time counts before and after enforcement, or before and after they stop enforcement, you see the numbers both in the city go down and in the surrounding areas go down. When LA was enforcement and they had almost a 50% reduction in the unsheltered homelessness, they did not see corresponding increases in LA County or in the wider California area. It reduced it. And according to a study by Burke and McDonald in 2010, the enforcement in Skid Row did not lead to any spillover effects on neighboring community. We know what happens in these areas when they happen. People go into shelter, they return to friends and family, they return to services, or yes, sometimes you say with Greyhound, they return to their family back in their original spots. So what we want to do is exactly the sort of services that Atlanta offers and should offer, emphasize those services, not the permanent housing, which is not going to be the solution, but those services that can help people get treatment and not merely stay in a place forever without any sort of mandatory treatment.
So I ask a question specifically to the bill. On line 47 and 48, there's this penalty essentially that talks about enforcing such laws that prohibit unauthorized camping and sleeping in public. how do you define, how will you know that the city of Atlanta is enforcing these laws that prohibit unauthorized camping and sleeping in public? Does that mean there can't be anybody sleeping outside? Can we have 5 people sleeping outside? At what point will we know if Atlanta is actually enforcing these laws that, if they don't enforce according to this bill, will make them not have the money that they need in order to address the problem?
Thank you very much, Senator. So this does give some discretion to the Department of Community Affairs and the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee to decide whether or not enforcement is happening. What we've seen in Texas after they passed this bill, a very similar bill, is that when enforcement is happening or is not happening is clear. You are actually seeing camps be removed. You are actually seeing streets and sidewalks be cleared. No, to answer your question, absolutely does not mean there is not a single homeless person on the street. That is not the goal, and that has never been the goal in any sort of enforcement. There will always be some people that go beyond the net of this. But when enforcement is happening, it is very clear that streets and camps are actually being cleared and when they are not. That doesn't mean 100%, but it means the city is taking action.
Sure. And then my final question for now is, you said that the goal here is not to criminalize people who are experiencing homelessness, and that the goal is not to have any arrest. However, on line 78, Part D, it says very clearly, any person convicted of violating this code section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. The last time I checked, and there's a law enforcement officer sitting here to my left who can verify this, a misdemeanor is a form of criminalization. So can you please help me understand how it is that you're saying we're not criminalizing this, but line 78 says specifically that you shall be criminalized for this after you've had your first, I understand you get a first pass, but after this first pass, it becomes a misdemeanor.
Thank you very much, Senator. So, yes, the goal, you absolutely need to have some teeth, some sort of enforcement to encourage people to move. If you merely ask everybody on the street, would you like to move into something, we all know that they are not going to take that up on their own. There's a lot of advantages to them, including someone who has a severe mental illness or an addiction, to continuing to live on the street. But when you've actually seen this enforced, as I'm sure the law enforcement officer knows, there is no desire among cops to arrest people and throw them in jail merely for laying out on the street. You need that incentive to do it. But as I said, when they enforced this in Colorado Springs in 2010, they reduced the unsheltered by 2/3, and they did not have a single arrest. When we did this in Austin, we've now been enforcing this over there for 8 months. Not a single recorded arrest. That is the intention. In both those places, you did have the law. As a law currently exists in Atlanta, this is merely telling them they have to enforce their own laws. And you have that in place, but the goal is not to use it. And what we've seen when people have these in place, they don't criminalize it. They help people move to a better circumstance.
We're going to move to our law enforcement, since that seems to be where the lines of questioning. So, Senator Roberts, I will turn it over to you for your questioning, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was curious about what Senator Jackson's last question was, but something else. If you look on line 51 and 52, it says this code section shall not apply to any county and shall not be construed to restrict any actions or impose any obligations on funding for any county law enforcement agency. I represent a consolidated government, as I think there are probably 6. I think there's Chattahoochee, Casita, Clark, Athens, Augusta, Richmond. What is where do they fall in the within this law if it's a consolidated government? Because the city of Columbus is the county. It's run by city councilors who are also members of the County Commission Association. So would these consolidated governments be considered municipalities under this law?
Thank you, Senator. My understanding is that they would, but again, they would only be considered if they had a per capita homelessness above the state average. But also, we'd be I'm sure the senator and everyone else would be very open to clarifying if there were some particular concerns about that issue.
And you said this was this law was passed in Texas.
A variation of this, at least the refusing the state funds to the cities that didn't enforce.
Do we know in the state of Texas if there are any consolidated governments?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, and very good. And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, a couple other things. Senator Jackson mentioned something about homeless people fleeing to the city of Atlanta for services, and I have definitely heard of individuals in other communities where they'll get on a bus and go to where they think the services are. And of course, I subscribe to a particular magazine that tracks certain policies around homelessness and crime and things of that nature. So I'm curious, what kind of decrease did you see in San Francisco and Los Angeles and other places when they took a new approach to getting the homeless off the street? What kind of percentage decrease, or if you know a number, that'd be great.
So thank you, Senator. So San Francisco, as many of you have seen, perhaps has never taken such an attitude to the street. There was a period in LA from 2006 to 2014. There was the Safer Cities Initiative that did take that. And what we saw, as I mentioned before to Senator Jackson, we saw about a 40% increase in homelessness in the area and with no spillover effects.
An increase or decrease?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies, Senator. A decrease in that time.
Okay, and at any time where we've seen these massive decreases of homelessness, have we seen increases in Atlanta's numbers of these homeless individuals coming here to Atlanta? Because if we're talking a 40%, I mean, what do you anticipate? What would you guess that number might be?
Thank you, Senator. It would be hard. I don't know anything about Atlanta. A lot of these cities are obviously very far away. But for all the evidence we have of enforcement is, again, there doesn't seem to be any spillover effects into neighboring counties or communities. So it would be odd if they had spillover effects for very, very distant cities or communities.
But do these other communities, do they do the point in time count?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, so when they do their point in time count, we have a number. And the number's not, because I've participated in these point in time counts where, especially when it moved into colder weather, where members of my agency were sent out because we have homeless camps, and then we have homeless people that sleep on the street and on the benches and behind buildings and things like this. So we attempt to go out and count, and we come up with an estimate, close estimate number. And so were these types of counts done in these other cities where we've seen decreases in population?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, in the cities like LA or Colorado Springs where they've done them, the numbers I'm using come from the point-in-time counts.
Okay, do you have any idea what those point-in-time counts might be?
Oh, as I said, the LA one, I would have to double check, but I believe the number was about 40% in LA proper, a reduction in unsheltered homelessness. And in Colorado Springs, there was a story that Howard's Pike Peak, which is their local main homelessness organization, there was a 2/3 reduction in unsheltered homelessness, and again, no seeming spillover effect.
Okay, is this law been passed in the state of Florida by any chance, or
No,
anything
Senator, not
similar? Okay. Because, and I want to find out if I'm tracking exactly what you're going to do. I was in Gainesville, Florida for an assessment center. We were down there assessing a local law enforcement agency, and I was discussing homelessness with them because I had just gotten back from Denver, Colorado. And amazingly, in Denver, at nighttime, their homeless population is very apparent. And then in the morning, when all the businesses open up, there are no homeless people out there. And I was always really curious. And they said, and I'll use their terminology, they herd them to the shelters. But in Gainesville, when I asked that question, what they told me they had done is the city had acquired an old correctional facility, a single-story work camp, if you will. They had gone in, removed all the cell doors off of the cells, and they allowed the homeless people, they went out and explained that this was available. Within that correctional facility, they offered certain services. So the individuals who had been sleeping on the street in Gainesville transitioned in there. Those who wanted to go inside and have their own room were able to go inside and have their own room, which had, as we know, a bed, a desk, and a toilet. And then those who chose not to, for whatever reason, and the vast majority of their homeless were those struggling with substance abuse or mental health issues, and in most cases both, as you said before, Mr. Glock. So that's how the homeless people by choice, once told there, went there, and then those who don't want to be inside were able to camp out in the green space within there. And then during the day, they were allowed to, I say allowed, they were free to go into the city, community, look for jobs, do whatever else they needed to do. Is this the vision that you see, or am I missing something here?
Thank you, Senator. I think the vision we see here is leaving it up to the municipalities exactly how they do this, that they get, however they best are able to reduce the homelessness count or to enforce them. That's up to them. A lot of their vision, some of the programs you mentioned sound like exactly the sort of thing that this $87 million coming from the stimulus fund should be funding, as opposed to permanent supportive housing. And that's exactly what the sort of benefits you'd see for this. Haven for Hope in San Antonio, where I was just doing one of these point-in-time counts on Tuesday, used a similar sort of model where they have a kind of outside area where people can stay for some time.
Now, is any of these cities, have they attempted to use the model where they move the homeless off the street and into hotel rooms and use federal funding to pay for hotel rooms for the homeless? Because I've looked at cases in New York City and San Francisco where those were absolutely disasters, and so
yeah,
is that's one of my
thank you, Senator. Yes, the California had a I think it was called Project Room Key, which was trying to buy a lot of these hotels and motels. It ended up costing tens of millions of dollars and having very few units, often which tend to disintegrate rapidly because they were not made for long-term habitation.
Okay, and you said they purchased them.
Usually it was purchased. I think there were some leases as well, but often it was purchased.
Right. So would your legislation disallow the purchase of properties using this funding from, and I'm looking in one spot, but I believe you used the name of something I'm fairly familiar with, the burn grant money?
Thank you, Senator. No, the burn grant money section of that merely allows the local municipalities the option of redirecting some of those to homeless outreach teams, such as have worked in Phoenix and Houston and elsewhere. But for the hotels units, now this is for the state of Georgia money, and under our thing, they would not be forbidden from using a motel or a hotel from.
Hey, just say it. I didn't say use. I said purchase and use. I want to be clear. Yeah. I don't want them to go rent rooms. I'm asking about purchasing property.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah. Under this bill, that would not be forbidden for the state government to purchase some rooms for individuals as long as it wasn't used as a permanent house. This allows the alternative use of it for a shelter, for services or something else.
Transition housing, would that be?
Transitional housing as well would be allowed.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ramon.
Thanks for coming to Atlanta to solve this problem. And I think this is not Atlanta problems only. It's a problem all around the country. Every major cities you go, you see this. My question is this Texas is the first one has this kind of law, some kind of variation, they say, or any other state?
Thank you, Senator. Texas is the first one that has a variation of the withholding state funds from cities that refuse to enforce camping bans, yes.
Oh, okay. So this is the only second state. Any particular reason you choose to Atlanta? Because around the country that I travel, including the national capitals, you go to Washington, D.C., I mean, every major city has a problem, if somebody says they don't have it. So any particular reason you choose Atlanta to help us out? Just wondering.
Yes, thank you, Senator. One thing I'd like to point out is actually today the Utah Senate just passed a bill that appropriates a lot more funding to help fight homelessness, but all to short-term shelters, and it allows the state government to withhold funds from any locality that does not enforce its camping ban. And Arizona has a similar bill using ARPA funds that will be in the Senate tonight as well. So this is something that I think a lot, this wasn't always the approach to solving homelessness. This focus on permanent supportive housing and leaving people on the streets and nothing else, that's a relatively new push, and it's become increasingly clear that that does not work. There is a whole variety of solutions in the middle that can fit the diverse needs of the diverse types of individuals who are dealing with homelessness. So the way I see this bill is there's a lot of one-time federal money coming in. Let's use that for more experiments rather than doubling down on an experiment that clearly has not worked and has not solved the problem in Atlanta.
So this bill, again, you don't want to use any fund, any permanent solution at all, or I'm just wondering, this is like totally.
Yes, to clarify, Senator, this does not touch any existing state funding. That all remains completely untouched. The strategies that are being used can continue to be used, but rather than doubling down on that approach, maybe it could help to try some other more unique approaches, whether that's a short-term hotel, a safe place for people who want to stay with their tents to be able to have security and sanitation. It could be everything from expanding mental health services and drug addiction counseling. It's anything that is not what's already coming from the vast majority of the funding going towards permanent supportive housing.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Merritt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few questions. How long has Texas had the program that you're referring to? How long have they been doing it?
Oh, thank you, Senator. Well, so the HB 1925 passed, and I believe it was May of last year. The local city of Austin, around the same time, actually had a popular initiative that passed a camping ban as well. So both of those things have worked in tandem, actually.
But it's been a year?
It's been about a year.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
So my concern is, we're proposing creating these environments, and what goes off in my head is how are we maintaining these environments over the long term? We're talking about, even if we're saying tiny homes, in theory, that sounds great. But even those communities would require upgrades at some point, maintenance, there's hygiene concerns. And I guess my concern is what guarantee that we have long term that those issues will be addressed, and who will be in charge of that maintenance, and how much is that going to cost?
Oh, thank you, Senator. So I think the important thing is any of sort of permanent project or long-term project is going to involve maintenance. The important thing here is this actually redirects it from something that's going to cause a lot more maintenance and a lot more cost down the road into things that actually work and do not have the same long-term budgetary burdens. So permanent supportive housing, even if they are funded as a capital cost by the federal government, the state of Georgia will then have to maintain and upkeep those for potentially decades to come. The alternative here, you have the option for services, you have the options for shorter-term shelters that do not have the extreme long-term high maintenance needs. So in either case, you will have that problem, but it's certainly less if you're not doing, quote, permanent housing.
Do you have those numbers?
Excuse me, Senator.
Do you have the numbers just for comparison, how much it's going to cost our state versus what you're saying, the plan that we're on right now, which we don't really have one? Mm-hmm. Do you have something for us to compare? Like, this is going to save you X amount, this will cost you X amount, or yeah.
Well, thank you, Senator. Right now, again, this, of course, does not change any dollar figures about total funding one direction or the other. But in terms of maintenance costs, that would be speculative. But I can't imagine that having permanent long-term housing in which you promise someone a house for the rest of their life, as opposed to shorter-term services, would actually cost less than the services and short-term shelter option.
Okay. But we have no guarantees. Correct.
Absolutely not, Senator.
Okay.
It's no guarantees.
All right, and I have one more question. And I do know that once we have, the environment that you're proposing is, I feel like they will be difficult to close. What programs or what are we offering to make sure that individuals that live there are getting the resources they need, mental health wise, job wise, to be able to come out of those temporary environments? Are we offering long-term support for those individuals so they don't have to come back, and that they can maintain, a sustainable way of life outside of that? And again, it comes back to who is funding those resources, who is offering those long-term resources.
Senator, if I may, and I'll let him finish up with this and that. There's a mental health bill coming from the House, from the Speaker of the House, to be exact. And when this was taken out of that bill completely for that reason right there, because we want to see what the House is going to put up for funding to make sure what you're asking is quantified as we go down the road.
And thank you, Senator. I would just add that, yes, obviously part of this is to move those funding from the expensive physical sort of plant, which is very expensive and does not focus on those services, to exactly the sort of services you talked about. We've seen places like LA and San Francisco, these permanent supportive housing units can cost up to $800,000 per unit. If you're using that same amount of money, and again, we're talking about changing the pot of money here, and you put more of that to services, that's exactly going to give the sort of support you need, as opposed to just focusing on the bricks and mortar when these mental health issues and these substance abuse issues are clearly the driving issue.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator.
That's all I have now.
C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is real simple. I grew up in the city of Atlanta, and I've just seen it pretty much all my life. I did hear you read some numbers and talk about the categories. However, those were the mentally ill and the drug addiction. I didn't hear, and I don't know if you all are tracking any, but how many are military veterans? Did we even break that down that
Thank
far?
you, Senator. No, I do not know those numbers for Georgia proper or for Atlanta.
And I raised that because my home church happens to be 2 blocks north of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And we've been taking care of the least, the less, and the lost for years. And many of them were veterans, even though the VA has programs. For whatever reason, they aren't there. So I'm just bringing that up to make sure that you might want to consider how many can be diverted to the services, because they really have served this country and should be getting services anyway, rather than living on the streets, whether by choice or mentally ill or whatever the others are. We all need to understand that there is a myriad of problems out here, but it's what we do for the least of these. That's what thus says. So we are, at my home church, and I'm proud to say, have been just making sure we take care of our own. So we have a special ministry that you can give cheerfully and religiously to the support of. So thank you all, though, for thinking outside the box and coming all the way from out there
Okay.
to help us, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Beautifully put.
Senator Jackson, quick
I'll try to keep this brief. So you've repeated multiple times that permanent supportive housing does not work. Can you please explain to me why you say that, and what would you say to the hundreds of Atlantans who are currently living in permanent supportive housing and not sleeping outside, but instead have the wraparound supports that they need?
Thank you very much.
Is it not working for them?
Well, according to most of the studies, it doesn't seem so. So I did mention the National Academies of Sciences, this big meta-survey. They looked at all the studies, and what I cited to you is, quote, no substantial published evidence that permanent supportive housing improves health outcomes for the homeless. And there's in fact some good studies, and I could cite you the Journal of Dual Diagnosis, that shows that people in those units actually have worse mental health and drug addiction issues precisely because they're so isolated from the rest of the community. Yes, there are some individuals that need permanent supportive housing. I absolutely will not deny it. And the vast majority of federal funds are going to continue to go to that. But we know that using it as a sole model won't work. One thing we do know, as I mentioned, cities have built thousands and thousands of these units and continue to see homelessness go up. That can't be the solution. We've been going down this path for almost 10 years now, and we've seen the problem get worse. And that can't be the solution in general.
Okay.
My last question, if you will, Mr. Chairman.
Quickly.
For real.
Quickly.
So you all put it here that there's money for homeless outreach teams, and in your homeless outreach teams it includes a police officer or a security officer. Now I've spent the last 5 years of my life working with people who are experiencing homelessness, and I've never encountered an experience where having a police officer present has made that person want to be more compliant. So I have an outreach team myself that I pay, and we don't have guys with guns there because people who are experiencing homelessness are afraid of them. So why are you insisting and that you have security officers present for these teams? Why are you not at least leaving that up to the city for us to choose? Maybe it will work in the Senator Robertson's area quite well, but why are you imposing that on other places?
Oh, thank you so much, Senator. So first, that is actually permissive statute that merely allows the cities, if they want to use that money for homeless outreach, to use it. In no way imposes it. But I will cite the homeless outreach. If I will double check for the homeless outreach teams, it should be up to 25%. Is that?
But if they create a team, it says shall, line 24.
If they create a team, of course they have to. And I would actually cite you the Houston homeless outreach team, a national model. There's a beautiful documentary done with that. It is staffed about 50% by police officers, and they've had wonderful success in Houston. Houston has reduced homelessness with enforcement by about 50% over the last decade.
Okay. Okie doke. Thank you. Make it a final and short because thank you, sir.
Will be the final comment. I understand it's election year and everybody loves law enforcement officers in election years, but I do want to point something out. That when the slogan everybody sees, serve and protect, comes out and it gets used a lot on the doors of vehicles, it's because that usually the people I've experienced in my 31 years as law enforcement, I find a tremendous amount of passion and compassion in law enforcement officers. And law enforcement officers look at the homeless the way most people look at the homeless, as unfortunate, lost in some ways, and actually want to volunteer and be part of the groups to go out there. So while at times, intentionally or unintentionally, law enforcement officers as described as some aggressive, mean bulldog who's going out there into the woods and the bushes to drag those poor individuals into places, I find in 100% of my experiences with dealing with the homeless and dealing with the men and women that work for me, that is not the case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'll go ahead and close. I know you want to get some
Close
questions.
statement real quick.
One thing we didn't mention this whole talk today is a safety issue. And when you consider the safety issue, I get out and run in the afternoons, and I met a homeless man over here by the Coca-Cola Museum and Aquarium. I've gotten to where I know him. He doesn't know what I do or anything about me. The bottom line of it is he said it's so unsafe on these streets at night. He said, I have to sleep with a buddy all the time, or two. One of us stays awake and one of us sleeps. He said, because he said people will come up and take everything you got, rob you, beat you, stab you, whatever, right on the streets. And my point by saying that is, if the city of Atlanta would take some of this vacant land they have and some of these parking lots they have and make it an area roped off or a safety area where people have a place to go to take their tents. This guy said, I would go. But he doesn't want to be manhandled. He just wants to go and have a safe place to go. And that's another thing. We just didn't talk about safety. You know, this is what we're trying to say. This will offer some safety.
Okay.
And this will offer a solution. And as the senator said over here a while ago, we've never had anything, and there's never anything been done. It's time to at least take a step and move forward. That's where we're at.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. We've got several people who want to speak, but I'm going to do a little bit of a chairman's issue. We have two senators who have duties that are going in places that I know they've got committees still to go to. Senator Mullis, with our rules chairman, I know that you have a simple, I say simple, nothing simple, but nevertheless, if you will present, and then we're going to bring back our witnesses since we've got that done. And if you will, sir, you're going to give us SB 562 and tell us about it.
Thank you for being kind, and I appreciate that. This is a simple bill, and I'm not going to go through the bill. I'll just tell you what it does. And this is just like the China bill we did the other day. This forbids the state agency from contracting with a government-owned or operated Russian company. That's what we do. Now, if you want me to go deeper, I'll be glad to. Same thing as the other bill we did the other day. If the Department of Administrative Services determine that a company is falsifying its certification, there will be a fine $250,000 plus a lot of other problems they'll have. So this is just, again, for us to, I can give you the political speech, but if I have the honor of moving forward, I'll wait till the floor to do that.
It's a very timely bill, I will say that.
Thank you.
Any of the committee?
When the time is right.
Time is right. We have a second by Senator Hatchett. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Thank you.
You're on to rules. Do you think you can get it by the rules chairman?
Tough guy.
He's a tough guy. He really is.
And look, let me tell you, if I can be of service to your committee members, please let them know.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. All right. Senator Kennedy, if you'll come. I wish they were all that quick and easy.
Yes, I do.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're rolling through. We're rolling through. I know that Senator Kennedy and all the issues going on, Senator Kennedy is going to present to us SB 534.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
And I know you will do us a phenomenal job, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm going to try to be as quick and efficient as our rules chair.
I think that would be wonderful.
And with your permission, I've got someone seated, Megan Schmidt, who is to my right, that once I conclude, if she could make a few comments, I'd appreciate the committee and the chairman allowing her to
Okay,
testify.
Megan, and we'll speak after you.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Sounds good.
You
All right.
have
Good
the floor,
afternoon.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee. Thank you for hearing this. Presenting to you Senate Bill 534. This is LC 365119. This is a fairly simple, straightforward bill. It's actually 9 pages, but if you look at the text of changes, it's only about a page and a half or so. I think Legislative Council just included all the areas around what we're proposing to change just so that everyone could put it in context. But in essence, a little background. America has the highest rate of philanthropic giving in the world, making philanthropy an essential part of an American way of life. This legislation, this proposed bill that you have in front of you, helps Georgia attract and retain charitable entities that meet the needs of our local communities. More than 5,700 501c3 charities are incorporated or have their principal places of business here in Georgia. This legislation protects charitable entities so that they can focus on their missions rather than complying with arbitrary or unilateral mandates that might come through from the state of Georgia. This legislation provides transparency by ensuring that any new requirements on charitable entities relating to the filing and reporting requirements would have to first be provided as notice to the legislature, and the legislature can then determine if such measures are appropriate. Similar legislation has been enacted in 7 states: Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, Arkansas, South Dakota, and Ohio. And in a moment when you hear from Ms. Schmidt, you'll understand that these issues are not just Georgia-centric. They're issues that have raised the attention of charities across the country. In fact, Ms. Schmidt is driven here from Nashville, Tennessee, just to speak to y'all. So what does the bill do? As I said, the bill is designed to create a predictable regulatory environment for private foundations and charitable trusts. After all of the uncertainty during and following the COVID-19 pandemic, charities in our state need the stability now more than ever in order to accomplish their goals and missions. The bill brings transparency and accountability to any new filing or reporting requirements by requiring that notice be provided to the legislature to determine best practices. The bill also includes important exemptions for fraud, misuse, ensuring that the state officials have proper oversight of the charitable sector. Those are really the only comments I had prepared. Mr. Chairman, if I may turn it over to Ms. Schmidt. With your permission, she has a few comments she'd like to share.
All right, if you give us your name and who you're with, that would be great. Thank you.
And I'll keep this pretty short. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Megan Schmidt, and I'm the Director of Affairs at the Philanthropy Roundtable. Philanthropy Roundtable's mission is to foster excellence in philanthropy, protect philanthropic freedom, and help donors advance liberty, opportunity, and personal responsibility. Today, the Philanthropy Roundtable has around 600 members nationwide, consisting of private foundations, community foundations, and family foundations, including right here in Georgia. Georgia is home to thousands of foundations that give billions to charitable causes each year. This includes religious and educational organizations and private foundations. This bill allows Georgia charitable organizations to focus on their governance and grant making instead of being subjected to the uncertainty of additional filing and reporting requirements. This is simply adding a layer of transparency that requires any state agency who seeks to apply additional filing or reporting requirements to give ample notice for the legislature to take action. Lawmakers must ensure any new requirements are closely scrutinized to ensure they are based on solid evidence of widespread need. When such burdens are sought by unilateral executive action, legislators have the responsibility to challenge the overreach that directly hurts the communities they represent. 7 states have enacted this legislation, and these states have made it hospitable for charities and created a predictable regulatory environment. We want to go on record expressing our support for this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Any questions? No questions? Okay. The committee, any position? Got a motion, got a second? You got a question?
I don't have a question.
You gonna move? Okay.
Just one appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it is appropriate, sir. Go right ahead. You have one. Senator Dugan?
I move to pass.
Do pass, okay. And we have a second, Senator Jackson. Okay, any further questions? None? All in favor? say aye. Aye. All opposed? Senator Kennedy, if you can get it by that rules chairman, you'll be okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you.
And thank you for the members
Thank
of the
you.
committee, and thank you for taking us out of order. So
All
thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry about that interruption there for just a few minutes as we're trying to handle this. We have, we've got 7, is that correct? 6, 7? Yeah, we're going to do these. We need to limit these to probably no more than 3 minutes if we can. We've got 1, 2, 3, and is it Catherine? It looks like Marchman. Is there Catherine Marchman? All right, Catherine, come right up. Welcome. Yeah, we've got. You want? Let's do Davenport first because she's been here before. Let me pull back out. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Let's do Mrs. Davenport because Daniel's back there, and I want to help Daniel. And if Daniel's the little boy right there that has great patience and a great smile. All right, Miss Gail, I'm sorry, and I know this has been longer, and Daniel's been patient.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring back to you SB 108. This legislation will create the Georgia Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired to take over blindness advocacy and service delivery with a focus on employability and quality of life from VGRA. The blind persons want to be useful, they want to work, and they feel that they can work if given the opportunity. It's really just a transfer from the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency to create the commission. The commission will be made up of 6 blind or visually impaired persons, 2 appointed by the governor, 2 appointed by the lieutenant governor, and 2 appointed by the Speaker of the House. And it would oversee vending operations by blind people. I know we push for time, but in the bill here, you will see that it will establish and administer a statewide program to certify individuals who are qualified to teach Braille. It will also provide library services to persons who are blind or visually impaired and persons with physical disabilities, and it will create and maintain an instructional media center for the production, purpose, distribution, reallocation, and warehousing of accessible materials for blind or visually impaired children and adults. I think the question and the problem was, will the money follow the commission? And that's what we're here for. The money will follow the commission.
Okay. Very good, very good. And you presented that before.
Yeah, we presented before.
Right.
You know, before
Right.
it passed unanimously out of this committee, and then it was recommitted.
Right. We're going to have one more speak. Is Chris Wells is here? He's going to speak, and we would lose power here. I don't know.
Oh, they have.
Oh, okay, we're back. Let him speak. Chris is here with the Georgia Vocational and Rehabilitation Agency. He's executive director. We've made contact with him, and I'm gonna say just a little bit as the chairman. This was presented to us last week, and there are some things that I am a little bit concerned about, and I'm gonna state that, Chris, up front. My assistant was contacting the office and doing that.
I'm sorry, Executive Director Wells wasn't able to be here today, regretfully, so I'm Jonathan Buxton, Director of Administration.
Okay, excuse me, Jonathan, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Here's the issues that I want to address up front and be very candid about. We started trying to communicate with the office on the 22nd, and it was really the 24th before we could get back. I called this number 3 or 4 times today, and all I got was a non-identifiable answering service. For someone who's blind, that's extremely concerning to me from a standpoint of our oversight and what we ought to be looking at from that standpoint. So I say that to you not to be critical, but for me, if I'm dealing with someone who's blind, they already have to overcome some obstacles to make things happen. And so that was very concerning when we were trying to get to the right person. One person said, I'm going to be here till Friday, and then I'm leaving, and there were things that were going on there. So I only lay that as the front of our work on the backside of what we're looking at first. So I want you to be aware of that. And I'll let you, before we take.
It's a concern for the chair.
It's a concern?
To the chair.
Okay, I'll let you speak on.
Mr. Chairman, you just talked about how much trouble you had getting somebody from this agency to come here. What we are attempting to do here is we're attempting to sever a responsibility away from a state agency, and if my recollection is correct, to allow a new executive director to manage this. And you also mentioned of what it was going to be intended use of is for the visually and the blind, visually impaired and the blind. And the Madam Senator has worked very hard on this.
Absolutely.
And I'm extremely disappointed that the head of that department, for whatever reason, could not be here. And this is of no, I'm not casting any disparages on the individuals here representing the department. But if this individual has this responsibility, then this individual needs to be sitting here in front of this committee. And I am personally not comfortable with putting the heavy responsibility of this on subordinates whose job is not to run this agency. And so I've got serious concerns if we consider passing this out today without the individual who you and your staff work so hard just to get in contact with.
Right. And here's what I don't want to do. Senator Davenport has worked extremely hard on this thing as far as doing it, and we passed this out last year. And what concerns me is that for the welfare of people that are have a problem that we're not addressing and the issues that we went through. So that's one of the things that I wanted y'all to know as a committee where we had done our back work, our background work as far as that. Since Chris is not here, I think I would like to just hear from you just from that standpoint, and then we've already got some committee comments, which but you know, my tendency is to ask the committee, do we need to, we got one more meeting. I don't like to hold Senator Davenport off again as far as that portion, but I agree with you. It would be nice to hear from the head, and that was Senator Robinson.
My concern, Mr. Chair, is we're voting on something, and if we take the emotion of the visually impaired and the blind out of the conversation, we are attempting to sever a responsibility away from a state agency. Mm-hmm. And if it were for maintenance or anything else, to sever that responsibility away, and I hear the money follows, except the money for the executive director, which has to come. And then this by some chance gets down to the governor's office who appointed this individual, then I have grave concerns that we're getting way ahead of what this is. And as much compassion as I have, and I know Daniel's mother and his grandma and understand the passion and what great people they are, but it's the fact that we're talking about separating a responsibility from a state agency that I think, not having the director of that agency here, that we're doing a disservice to this piece of legislation.
Good words, Mr. Senator. Before we go, Senator Dugan, excuse me, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm taking a little different tack than the chair down there, and I want to hear what you got to say. I want to hear your presentation. And for all I know, your guys got COVID and couldn't be here. I have no understanding of why they're not here, but it does speak volumes that something that has passed before, that's been reintroduced, doesn't garner enough concern on the appearance that they would show before the committee. So that is a little bit of concern, and unfortunately, you're feeling the brunt of it. And I hate that for you, because I know this has got to be uncomfortable sitting there taking this for something that you didn't you actually showed up. So I appreciate you being here, and I do want to hear what you have to say, but I do have deep concerns about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we will, if you will, I'm going to let Jonathan, correct?
Jonathan Buxton, correct.
Jonathan, let's let you make your comments, and then we'll work from there. Okay.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to thank the chairman and the committee for allowing GVRA to be here today to speak to Senate Bill 108. Again, I'm Jonathan Buxton. I'm the Director of Administration. I have Mamta Patel, our Director of Fiscal and Budget, with me here today. And like I said, Executive Director Wells could not be here. So we've provided a small packet of information if you choose to review that. A little closer. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this better? Thank you. So, and I'm not sure what level of detail you'd like us to get into, but I was prepared to speak to, from a high level, some of the programs and services that GVRA does provide as it relates to Senate Bill 108, if that's okay.
Go
Okay.
with
So,
what you've got.
In 2020, GVRA had its most recent comprehensive statewide needs assessment, in which we identified approximately 260,000 individuals in Georgia who are blind or visually impaired. In FY 2021, we provided services to individuals who are blind or visually impaired in the amount of approximately $4.3 million. And those are direct contracted services, not necessarily the additional cost of the counselors that perform the counseling services with the individuals, but those are the actual services such as vision evaluations, braille instruction, orientation and mobility training, technology access training, vision rehabilitation therapy, adjustment counseling to blindness. We also offer tactile American Sign Language upon need. And we do recognize there's been service delivery issues, and I'm going to follow up on that phone number issue. I'm not sure what happened with that, because we have actually, that's one of the improvements we've been making, is creating a call center to prevent those types of issues. So we'll definitely follow up on that. That's a huge concern of mine.
This was directly off of Chris's card. I called that number 3 times before this meeting.
Okay.
And I got an answering service that did not identify who it was.
Okay. We'll definitely look into that. And we do know there have been service delivery issues over the years, and it is something that we have been working diligently to correct, and we've got several corrective actions that we have been taking. Some of the issues directly involving services to individuals who are blind or have visual impairments is that there is a nationwide shortage of providers, and most of our services are provided through contracted providers. The most significantly impacted services for Georgia with the provider shortage is orientation and mobility training, as well as vision rehabilitation specialists. And as far as in Georgia, the areas most impacted currently is Southwest Georgia, is most impacted by the provider shortages. So we've been actively pursuing additional providers. We've been educating our consumers on the potential opportunities to become providers, to go to school and get the education and to actually become providers so that we can grow that future provider pool. We've been working to increase collaboration between counselors and existing providers through roundtable discussions, and they had a discussion back in December with some good input from the providers and some good dialogue between the counselors and the providers as well. We've also been encouraging existing providers to expand into the underserved and unserved areas. So where we do have good providers and they're covering services in certain areas, we've really been talking to them about, could they identify people that they could outsource and help to provide services in those areas. Another issue that we know is impacting services is a counselor shortage, and we're seeing this across the nation as well. Other state VR agencies are having counselor shortages, and just recently, effective March 1st, we modified the qualifications required to become a counselor to increase the candidate pools. And based on that, we're starting to see additional candidates for the counselors. We've also established a career ladder and implemented salary adjustments for retention and also recruitment purposes. We've also identified that it is proven that dedicated counselors for the blind and low vision population increases the service delivery effectiveness for those individuals. So currently we have 6 dedicated blind and low vision counselors, and we're actively recruiting additional. In fact, I just found out today that we had a candidate that they're going to offer a job to be a 7th one, so we're really hopeful we'll get that individual on. Currently, the 6 individuals have approximately 563 clients that they're serving. We've also developed a dedicated training unit. And part of their curriculum is actually a 4-part series on topics relating to services for individuals who are blind or visually impaired. And that series focuses on the individual from the referral to the client case closure. So essentially from the time they submit a referral for services through receiving those services through a successful closure in employment. And so that's part of that training, is so that all of the counselors across the state will kind of understand that process and can better serve the blind and low vision population. visually impaired population, I'm sorry. We've got a few other initiatives, and again, that's the centralized call center, which we're working to fully staff and get that staffed with individuals who are knowledgeable of general case management practices, so that if a client does call in and they can't speak to their counselor in that moment, they can at least speak to somebody who can review their case and provide some general information until their counselor is available to speak with them and move the case forward. We've also developed a referral portal, and that is currently in the user acceptance testing phase so that you can submit an online referral. And we do have representation from the blind and visually impaired individuals on that user acceptance testing team as well. We've been developing and revising standard operating procedures as it relates to case management practices for counselors as a whole. We've been expanding the quality assurance the quality assurance process, and hiring a few additional people to review cases and ensure that we are consistently managing the cases and providing quality services across the state. We've also been in the process of implementing performance-based metrics to hold the counselors accountable for providing quality services, and also ensuring that they're managing the cases properly from the time they come in, that they're not sitting any longer, they're not just sitting on a caseload and nothing's being done. We do recognize that sometimes it does take a little extra time to get an individual through the process. A lot of times in the eligibility phase, we're required to get documentation from physicians, and sometimes it takes some time to get that documentation, and that does cause some delays. But essentially, the counselors are being trained to manage those as best as possible and get those documents in so we can determine eligibility and get the individualized plans for employment developed as quickly as possible. Regarding the bill itself, one of the items that I did note is it does appear there may be additional impacts for other entities, just from the cradle to grave services that it does call for. It does indicate that potentially Georgia Department of Education's Georgia Academy for the Blind, the Georgia Library Services for the Blind and Print Disabled, and Georgia Institute of Technology's Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation. And if you're not aware, that's the organization that administers Georgia's Assistive Technology Act requirements, and commonly referred to as Tools for Life.
Okay. Committee, any questions from the committee? Senator Robertson? Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to thank my fearless leader for having a softer delivery than I have. I am.
He's just a teddy bear.
I've been known for being extremely subtle. But thank you so much for your presentation. I'm curious, and I understand the provider shortages. I think that's common in most professions throughout the country right now, especially those dealing with health care issues and things of that nature. Yeah, I noticed one of your slides, you talk about vocational services blind and visually impaired, where you talk about the 6 counselors serving 563 participants. On the second line, it says services are provided both in-house and by paid service providers. Could you tell me what percentage of services are offered in-house compared to what percentages are offered through a contract service?
Yeah, so essentially the counseling that the counselors do, that's actually considered a service. And so all of that is provided in-house. So when you come in, the counselors are in-house services. The vast majority of the actual services geared towards the blind and visually impaired is performed by service providers. So we don't have staff doing orientation and mobility training. We don't have staff trained to do Braille instruction and those types of things. Those are outsourced.
Would it be fair to say that the 6 counselors are doing basically diagnostic type work where the person comes in, they interview them, find out exactly what their needs might be, and then they move them out into the service provider arena? Is that correct?
Sort of. When you come in for services, part of it is determining eligibility. Do you meet the criteria for the program? The other piece of it, though, is developing that individualized plan for employment. So they're working with the individual to determine what is it that the individual is what career path or what occupation are they wanting to go into, and then from there, what services are going to be necessary to get them to the point to where they'll be successful in that. And then they also are helping to coordinate job placement services and actually getting them into a job. We don't actually close a case as successfully employed until an individual has been employed for 90 days.
And what you just described, that is what the 6 counselors do.
That's correct.
Okay, I think I'm tracking that would be somewhat of a diagnostic type evaluation to figure out the uniqueness of each individual so that we can make sure and get them on the correct track, like you said,
Yes.
to get them for whatever the career choice may be or something of that nature. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. We've got one person signed up, Betty Grinovich. Betsy. And she was going to speak for us, so thank you. Let her have the front and we'll come back. All right. Okay.
Good evening, committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak again today. I have a couple new things that we didn't have the last time, but just to comment on Chris not being here, this is what our services are like. If he has COVID, yes, I understand that, but if he doesn't and he's not here, it tells our blind and visually impaired community again that we don't really matter. And the thing I want to share with you is our former president of Georgia Council of the Blind, Alice Richard, has been getting calls recently where the counselors are telling the parents their kids cannot be served as 14-year-olds. They have to wait till they're 18, and that is against federal law. They have to be served at 14. And she said the least they could do is at least offer vision tests, but they're offering nothing for our high schoolers. So they, as the senator already experienced from the phone calls, they do not know what they're doing in our blind community, whereas if we have our commission, people will know because they will be trained and they will be totally dedicated to the blind and visually impaired. 6 counselors is not even enough to hardly do 3 or 4 blind people as much as some take. So I would really appreciate your consideration, and now you've experienced what we've experienced over the many years with this organization.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for Daniel, too. All right. Well, any comments from our committee? Make a motion? Do pass. We got a second. Okay, we've got a second. Senator Jackson. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Got it? Okay. Okay. Senator Davenport? What? Number, what, you got a number there? Excuse me, I'm sorry. No. That's SB 5. SB, no, the vote is what I was asking. 108. No. What was our count? Our count? One no. One no? Yes. 1 no, okay. And you had what, 7 issues? 7 to 1, okay. Senator Davenport, it's not perfect, but I think, and we had a meeting previously and we had told them to be here, and when someone does not answer their phone, and this is the card I have, that very much concerns me, so I wish you the best of luck as you move forward on this, okay? Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Okey doke. And I'm sorry that things come like they are, but they are like they are from that standpoint. So we will regroup to, thank you, okay. Regroup to SB 535, and we've got people to speak.
Chairman, Commissioner Nunn asked if he could speak next before the applicants were.
Okay.
He's here. He's over here.
Okay.
He is the commissioner.
Okay.
Commissioner of Department of Community Affairs.
Excuse me. Come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I know the hour is late. I'll try to be brief.
Give us your name, position, and who you work for, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Christopher Nunn. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs. So I work for the state. and glad to be with you all today. And I apologize, I'm working off of the LC that was online.
Yeah,
so I heard you say you were working off a sub. I'll just reference the sections.
And we're doing a hearing on this. That was one of the reasons we got this late yesterday. And
Yep.
there have been people who have not, and we'll be meeting again next week.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I mean, your staff reached out yesterday, and I know this is important, so that's why we're here.
Thank you.
I will absolutely, and I will say that, Mr. Glock and Mr. Meyer have a strong policy point of view, so I'm just going to speak to you from an execution standpoint. I applaud the creative thinking these advocates have put forth. I was making notes as they were going through, and I think a lot of the points about enforcing local laws are an issue that's left to the local of enforcing those laws. I'm really not going to speak to the policy issue because that's kind of y'all's job and we just execute. But I will say I do think that there are aspects of this legislation that seem to stem from a fundamental policy disagreement between the folks behind the bill and the federal government. And I make that point because I'm going to speak to that. That's kind of fuels some of our concerns with the implementation of this legislation. I understand that they are pursuing a bill in Congress, House Resolution 6018, that will address at least some of the aspects of this bill that seem to be targeting the housing first policy, which is kind of at the core here. So in terms of implementation, I'm going to focus on two things that we have concerns about. And they're both in the definitions, which on my version are on page 2. And the first is regarding continuums of care. So the term continuum of care on my version is line 20. So A1. It's not in here? Okay.
You have else, which else?
Okay. The second, so I'll just skip that one.
Okay.
So thank you. That's really helpful. So
Absolutely.
let me just speak to this.
Okay.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Let me speak to the concern that we have regarding the funding. And this is where I just think Mr. Glock and I have a strong difference of opinion, mine born from conversations with HUD. All of these funds that have been talked about today that flow through ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, flow through HUD. It's the home program that is a part of HUD, and HUD has given us explicit instructions about how to prepare a plan for use of those funds, and in that plan, eligible uses for those funds. When we look at the requirements that HUD has set forth, the activities related to the camping and some of those simply don't fall into the eligible uses that are required by HUD. So there's, you are correct, there's $87.7 million at the state. There's actually $137 million that flows to the state of Georgia. Some of this money actually flows directly to local jurisdictions like Atlanta, like DeKalb County, like Columbus, like Savannah, and the rest flows to the state for balance of state. We have significant concerns that we, would jeopardize the receipt of those funds because I strongly believe that HUD would not approve our plan were we to include some of the elements of this bill. And secondly, that we would jeopardize having to repay those funds if we did get our plan if we got our plan approved and flaunted the fact that these some of these provisions fly directly in the face of HUD's requirements. And so I listened as we were talking about some of the things done in other states. And listen, I've talked with Bobby Wilkinson in Texas, who is my contemporary there, about this legislation last year. I will have another conversation with him. I've texted him up over here. I'll have another conversation with him tonight. I can talk with my state colleagues. A lot of what you talked about was, Austin, was San Francisco, was local, not, state level. But I'm happy to look into that. I think that there is a little bit of a confusion about homeless, the home ARP funds, the funds that we're talking about, are intended to be used for homeless and people at risk of homelessness. And I think that that's a little bit different definition than just the unsheltered homeless population, which I get. You know, any prudent person could drive around and perhaps, make the observation that we see more unsheltered homeless on our streets than perhaps we did in 2019. The data, we'll have the data at some point soon that we can either prove or disprove that fact. But I mean, really our biggest concerns, at least out of the gate when y'all called yesterday afternoon, are and it sounds like we've stripped the continuum care piece out of there, that this was unnecessarily confusing to have two different things that were diametrically opposed that were called the same thing. And we think that it is financially risky to the state. So happy to entertain any questions.
Okay. I'm just going to ask your last comment. When you say financially risky to the state, can you be a little more detailed of what you think that would be?
So if we submitted a plan that was based on this approach, I don't believe the plan would be approved. If the plan weren't approved, we would not get the $87.7 million. If we, and there are some, I mean, I've tried to think about how we might be able to work together. Mr. Glock and I have not had many conversations, but we did have a conversation maybe last March. And I've thought about, okay, within the construct that is laid out by HUD, is there anything that you could do? I mean, you talked about the congregate shelter component or the non-congregate shelter component. The requirements for non-congregate shelter include that the facilities must be structurally sound based on existing state building codes. So right there, that's just the first. I think that the tent encampment probably doesn't line up. Must provide each individual or family with acceptable living individual rooms to sleep, must have natural and mechanical ventilation, must have water supply free of contamination, in-unit sanitary facilities, on and on. Yeah. It, as the HUD folks have explained to me, it contemplates a structure. So I think that we risk that if we were to come up with an approach that we could apply, and I think the term was used that we might use these funds to pilot or to experiment. There's also a 10-year use period. And so if we were to implement an experiment, and there are probably, when you talk about Utah, I imagine that they may be using state fiscal recovery funds, not the HUD home ARP funds, because the state fiscal recovery funds are more flexible in their use. But under HUD's definition, we have a 10-year use period, and if we were to experiment and that experiment didn't last the 10 years, then we are also on the hook to repay those funds. So I think there's a financial risk on the front end with getting a plan approved and actually getting the money, and there's a potential financial risk on the back end on the 10-year use period.
Okay. Senator Roberts.
Commissioner Dunn, it's always...
Whoops.
Thank you. Commissioner Dunn, it's always great to see you, and I appreciate the juggling you do in that department. It's a tough lift. The money you're talking about, how much of it goes to local governments? You said I think there was a little over 100. Right. What's the...
So in the state there is we received $137 million through, I think it's section 32. He knows the 3205
right.
Of the American Rescue Plan. Of that $137 million. All but 87 million went to a handful of larger local jurisdictions. The 87 million that comes to the state is for what we call, and again, this is another wonky term, balance of state. It's everything that doesn't fall into those jurisdictions. And so that's all of that would be used across the state. The 87.7 would be used across the state in those smaller jurisdictions.
Do we have any way of tracking how much of that money is being used for those communities that are at risk of being homeless?
Right. So right now, none of it is because we haven't even submitted our plan yet. I could edit my question and say,
as you work through your plan, do you have any ideas what percentage of that's going to be used for at-risk, for those
Yeah,
Georgia
absolutely.
citizens who are at risk?
Well, that's
of
where I
being
was going.
homeless?
I anticipated that aspect of your question. So based on all of the public comment that we have received over the last number of months, a significant, not all of that, but a significant percentage would go for at-risk population. I think there is certainly, as you pointed out, in the other eligible uses, there is some portion that would go towards homelessness prevention and some of those, but the at-risk piece, and just so we are all aware, so the Atlanta Regional Commission yesterday released a report that talked about the fact that just in Metro Atlanta, that we have lost over 60,000 units of affordable rental housing over the last 5 years. We have, as the state administrator of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, we have many participants in the Housing Choice Voucher Program who have a voucher but cannot find an affordable, a unit that they can rent with that voucher. So there is and of course, if you don't, then you end up homeless, right? And so that there's a substantial portion that will go to that at-risk population.
Mr. Chairman, just a final question. Is part of the plan trying to develop, locate, or provide some type of housing that will fit within the voucher? Rental property, leases?
So the affordable housing development, the rental property, that's been the number one need from communities as we have talked to communities across the state. That is the number one need. We certainly would not invest entirely in that in that space, but that has been the predominant feedback is we need more rental housing stock.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Any more questions?
So would it be better for us to invest in more affordable housing? I guess ultimately that's what we would want.
Well, as the Housing Finance Agency for the state, I would say yes. I mean, I think that
right.
I think that there are. I mean, again, I think that the advocates are trying to do something to address a need in our community, and we have people in need in lots of different situations, right? Hopefully by developing more affordable housing stock, we can help to address the problem across the board. But there are other steps that need to be taken. So yes,
that's my question is, should we be using these resources and these ideas and these proposals for ideas to build affordable homes instead of a temporary, tent structure?
Okay, thank you. We've got some people who want to speak. Thank you for being here. While you've got here, since you hadn't talked to Judge Glock since March, y'all could talk some today, maybe, and catch up.
So I have a 5 o'clock meeting that I'm 40 minutes late for.
I understand.
So
y'all swap cards. Okay, very good. Okay, we're going to limit the testimony of individuals. We need to go 2 minutes, or we're going to run out of time, and we're already running behind. I appreciate your patience. I wish there was a way for me to make it all work together, and we're juggling a little bit, but we'll try to go. Catherine Marchman, thank you for your patience and for being here.
we can all come up together. That might help.
Okay, I love group. Y'all, if y'all sing together, that will be great. We'll take you all together, and if you'll introduce each of who you are, so we'll have that on record. And though you realize, is one person gonna speak or all speak?
I think we are each going to speak.
Each are going
briefly.
to speak. Okay, that's fair. So we'll give each one, and we'll try to do it at 2 minutes. I wish I could give you more, but let's go from there.
Okay.
And let's see. Okay, Catherine first. All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Catherine Marchman Bassel. I just got married, and I am the CEO of Partners for Home. We are the lead agency for the Atlanta Homeless Continuum of Care. So that wonky term that the commissioner mentioned, we lead the COC for the city of Atlanta. We do not do direct services. Rather, we work with all of the homeless service providers to try to align that work, to align resources, resources to reduce and end homelessness in our community. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been working in the space of homelessness for the last 25 years, both living and working in shelters, as well as working in the behavioral health space at Mercy Care, at our Healthcare for the Homeless organization. Prior to this role, I've been in this role for the last 6 years. What we know currently, actually I want to correct a few things, is that our overall numbers of people experiencing homelessness in the city have actually reduced by 25% since 2015. Mr. Glock is correct. From 2019 to 2020, we saw the first increase in unsheltered homelessness. We actually are the lead for the point in time count. We lead that effort annually, and we just conducted our unsheltered count this past January. Our numbers, while not public or finalized just yet, are actually showing a reduction in our unsheltered count, despite what feels like a visible increase in unsheltered homelessness in our community right now. We are aware of that. In 2020 to 2021, we saw a 13% reduction in our sheltered number, although we did not conduct an unsheltered count last year. What we know is that during COVID, we aligned a tremendous amount of federal and public and private resources, $24 million, to create a non-congregate shelter hotel to move people quickly off the street, have a safe and dignified place for people to go that folks were actually willing to go into. It also created a safe staging place for us and our outreach teams to be able to quickly engage with people experiencing homelessness.
Whoa.
And then allowed us to create the necessary permanent housing resources to be able to move people into housing. We housed a little over 700 households, which is why we believe we're actually seeing those small but steady reductions in both our sheltered numbers and our unsheltered numbers. While we know that PSH is not the only solution, supportive housing, we do know, and I need to make sure that this is on record, that this is an evidence-based solution. It is, in fact, one of the only solutions that the federal government through HUD funds currently. It is not the slam dunk. It's not the solution for every single person, but the study that's pointed to by Mr. Glock only speaks to health outcomes. What he neglected to share with you is supportive housing has a plethora of evidence that supports the fact that it is successful at reducing returns to homelessness, at stabilizing people in housing and preventing them from coming back, and actually increasing income, and most importantly for our community is reducing the cost to our social service system. So if you look at the cost analysis, the cost benefit analysis of placing somebody in supportive housing, actually ending their homelessness, which is the end goal. We want that end outcome, because if we get somebody into housing, we have in fact then ended the problem of homelessness. We do believe there are some interim solutions that we need to invest in, and that is something we're actually working on now in partnership with this new mayor, who is now committing to invest additional resources to helping us acquire and lease new hotel rooms for emergency housing so that we can have that safe, dignified place to place people in the interim while we get them into housing. And that is really what I believe is the solution to actually continue to see the reductions that we want in our community.
Thank you for, and I said, thank you for your work. I mean, Senator,
It's real quick, and do you know how many since 2015 y'all have been able to move into permanent supported housing? A percentage number or an actual number?
I can get you our housing placement number. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. We did, however, double our housing placements with that 700 number in the course, matter of months during COVID with the housing surge that we were able to invest in.
But that wasn't from 15 until now. You're talking about from what, 2019 until now, or 2020 until now? The 700 number?
That 700 was from December of 2020 through about April of 21.
So it was at the beginning of the pandemic?
Well, it was mid-pandemic.
Mid-pandemic?
Yeah.
Okay, and where did you find most of the permanent supportive housing?
So we actually created rapid rehousing. We don't just rely on supportive housing. Rapid rehousing is another effective housing intervention. And what we did was we went out into the market and we actually incentivized landlords with flexible dollars that we had to partner with our providers, and we placed people into those units and paired them with services to support them and maintain their tenancy.
So the permanent supportive housing y'all have been tackling and obviously being successful in finding, these are all properties owned by landlords who are willing to work with you and be flexible. So we're not moving people into hotels and things like this. We're moving them into real houses where they have privacy and the amenities that most of us enjoy when we're at home.
That's correct.
Okay.
We did, however, lease a hotel for the first 18 months. We leased the entire hotel, and we used that as non-congregate shelter.
Right.
That is an eligible activity that the commissioner was referencing for the home dollars.
No, yeah, and I'm very familiar with that, but that's not what you did with the 700 we're talking about. You went out and actually found affordable housing for those individuals, correct?
We did both. We placed many of them into the hotel temporarily while we worked on getting them into housing.
Okay, and you were able to get the 700 all into housing.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, okay. Next.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Mariel Risner-Sivley. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Supportive Housing Association. I'm going to go a little bit off script because I have less time. Our members, the people who are interested in what we do, they do behavioral health services and housing, or they're housing providers that want to give behavioral health services. They are quality providers. You have them in each of your districts. It could be done through a community service board. It could be done through a nonprofit. These are the people that you want to send your family to if you have a crisis. These are the providers that you want to be supporting. And so when I looked at this bill, I was very disheartened. And I want to just give you a better understanding of what it does. In terms of the HUD home ARP funding, it's specifically thoughtfully created by HUD to create Home for the Homeless funding. It is for the purpose of housing. It's thoughtfully created. It's for the supportive services, and it's for the affordable housing piece. There's also the non-congregate shelter piece to get someone temporarily until they can be moved into housing. So when we're talking about constructing supportive housing, in this day and age, what we're really talking about is a set-aside within an affordable housing development. So each one of your communities needs more affordable housing. And what we're talking about with the home ARP funds is a set-aside. It's generally about 10%. And it's set aside for people of extremely low income to get some supportive services within that unit and to be integrated within the community. So if the allocation plan is changed to something different, what you're really saying is that you're not going to be creating these special set-aside units within multifamily housing. That's the consequence of using this funding, taking it away. And so this funding is really an investment in affordable housing with these set-asides for these extremely low-income individuals who need these supports. So I just wanted to make sure you had an understanding about the home ARP funding. Also, in terms of the criminalization aspects of
If you'll wrap up your 2 minutes is going, we're going to, okay.
It's up, okay.
Okay. Or if you want to finish up in 30 seconds, can you do that? Just kind of final thoughts.
Yes. So it would penalize the cities and nonprofits that would most need the funding to provide the services. And we know that people will have, or that there will be a greater high per capita of homelessness in the areas that provide the services. So it would be an unchanging, stagnant amount of discipline and punishment to the cities. It would never change, and so it's very antithetical to being helpful. I could continue about that.
Okay. I'm going to let the next ones, so we're running on time, and we're trying to get through
Absolutely,
everybody
Mr.
before dinner.
Chairman. Thank you,
You're
members of the committee. My name is Elizabeth Apley. I'm an attorney, and I am here representing the Georgia Supportive Housing Association, Presbyterians for a Better Georgia, Enterprise Community Partners, Georgia Advancing Communities Together, and 9 to 5. We work in a variety of ways to address housing affordability and homelessness. I'm going to start with a little bit of history. In 1991, and it's still a law in the books, that the General Assembly affirms the state policy to provide decent, safe, and affordable housing to all members of the population of this state. And this is part of the governing law for the Department of Community Affairs. There are no new resources or funds in this bill.
The state's commitment to housing and homelessness is very small. The State Housing Trust Fund for the Homeless, which was created over 30 years ago under Joe Frank Harris, has been funded at a static level of $3 million without increase over more than 20 years. The state low-income housing tax credit funds construction, and the state housing voucher program, which is part of the settlement agreement between the state and the Department of Justice, requires the state to fund those people who have severe and persistent mental illness and cycling through the criminal justice system and the hospitals and the emergency rooms, to provide them with permanent supportive housing. We're now serving fewer than 2,000 people through the state housing voucher program. The obligation under the settlement agreement is to fund and provide services to 9,000 people. We cut the funding to the state housing voucher program by 24% in FY21. It has not been restored. The governor recommended a small increase that would be less than a quarter of what was cut. And just to finish, Mr. Chairman, so we that's quite a chime. You know, it makes you almost feel good about it. There were also cuts to the reentry housing that Governor Deal instituted that haven't been restored. And so just this morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, you all voted for Senate Bill 403. And the heart of Senate Bill 403 is to avoid the criminalization of people with severe mental illness and addiction. You heard from the authors, people saying that overwhelmingly this is the population we're talking about in the unsheltered homeless. So you cannot reconcile SB 403 and House Bill 1013, which has the same dedication not to criminalize homelessness. And this bill, and I can go through the line and verse, the multiple ways that it does, even creates a brand new state law to criminalize sleeping in public. So I'm available to you. We can bring the other witnesses back at your convenience. We appreciate your patience and attention.
Thank you. And sleeping in public could get you, if you use that in a general term, we'd need to really look at the definition on that, because I see our chamber sometime, but nevertheless.
And you look out at committee.
Yeah, this crowd, yeah. We got some really bad cases.
I was loose in my language.
I'm with you. Yes, sir.
Stan Jones of Nelson Mullins Law Firm. We are a lobbying group. We represent Partners for Home. I don't want to extend any comments. It's hard to be inspiring before dinner. But I think the 2 points struck me that are not quite, at least I want to accent more. So one is housing first, and supportive housing has been a long-standing policy for people around the mental illness community for 45 years. And Georgia had the biggest inpatient asylum in the world, 1959, 12,000 beds. We've got about 1,800 now. We probably need a few more. But over that period of time, we have worked very hard to have supportive housing for people who suffer from mental illness. And there will be a mental illness bill. The Senate's already passed 2. So the co-responder bill today, the parity bill last week. The House bill contains those 2 and several other provisions. And the budget, it contains a significant amount of new money for mental illness and substance abuse. And we also learned last week that some of the Pfizer pharma opioid settlement money is also coming to Georgia. It's about $600 million. So I think the bill's not ready for prime time, if you will. And it prohibits use of this new ARPA pot of $87 million. It prohibits using that for supportive housing. So this group of people involved on the trenches of trying to improve that situation, the one thing the bill does is to say you can't do that. And then it does try to inspire the cities to do more. Well, I think the cities are already doing some more. I mean, Catherine has described what she does. I saw the plan that Savannah had, was in the paper about 10 days ago. And it has a wide range of services from rapid rehousing to building more community housing.
Okay.
Community housing is an economic investment that employs people and uses the contractors in everybody's district. It's actually partly an employment act.
Okay.
So I would say, let's look at all the pieces that are going to come your way and be resolved in the next 4 weeks. They're going to do some more things for mental health. You know, I don't know that anybody objects to trying an encampment, but this bill actually goes past that. It's sort of trying to claim some of the money
Okay.
for that use and prohibit the use that we've all been pursuing vigorously for 50 years.
Okay.
Stop.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Any questions? Well, we got, okay. Yep. Well, we have a gong too. This.
I am aware of that gong.
Come forward. Please give us your name. Thank you for your patience. It's been long, I know, but we appreciate it. Thank you.
No, good evening. Thank you. My name is Kenyatta Mitchell. I represent the city of Atlanta. I think since this party was about me, I guess I should say a few words, right? So first off, I represent the mayor for my job, but in my faith, I have to start with, it's hard for me because we will be punishing nonprofits, right? So we talked about what we do for the homeless at Antioch and what we do for the homeless in the Episcopal Church, and that would all be penalized by this law if the city of Atlanta does not hit defined metrics. So I know I'm supposed to speak first about the city of Atlanta, but I have Monsignor would get me if I didn't talk about what the faith community is doing. So I'm going to start there. The second thing is we heard quite a bit about LA and Austin, right? I'm not sure if Atlanta wants to follow that lead, but we talked a lot about LA and Austin. So I want to talk a little bit about what the city of Atlanta is actually doing right now. So y'all, when we go outside, there was a homeless encampment right outside. The mayor, myself, the COO, and a bunch of folks at the city of Atlanta got together and placed those people in a hotel temporarily. We didn't just place them in a hotel, and Catherine here did a lot of that work. We didn't just place them in a hotel. We gave them food so they can eat, so they can sustain, so we could find them other accommodations. The work that we were able to do and pull together very quickly would no longer be legal if we had our resources taken away from us. We are working. I mean, the mayor has been mayor for 57 days. Please give us some time to clean this up. We're working very, very hard to clean this up. I understand that a lot of people have had issues with the city of Atlanta, which is the reason why I left private sector to come and work for the city of Atlanta. I feel very deeply about this. I feel very passionately about this, and I'm not sure what else to say but to say that. But thank you.
Thank you. Very good job. Thank you so much. All right. Do we have anyone else? Hold on. We've got. Are you signed up?
Dr. Van Dien.
Doctor.
I think in 2 minutes.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. I'll be brief.
Okay.
Let me do this disclaimer. The testimony I'm about to give is my own and does not represent Georgia Act, because Georgia Act does oppose this bill, and that's Georgia Advancing Communities Together. I'm coming to you as a person who was formerly homeless and as an uncle that died with a heroin needle in his arm. If I could have saved him from the street, even if it had been jail or an encampment, that was okay because I don't have to go to a grave to see him. And I hear a lot of this testimony, and even amongst my colleagues, but when we're talking about these programs and services, we forget about the least lost and the left out. The people who are actually homeless. No one can tell me how to solve my homelessness but me. And what I needed was a job. That's all. I tried to go into these different programs, myself being pregnant, with my 18-year-old daughter could go, but guess what? My 17-year-old son couldn't. He was too old. And I refused to split my family. So I did what I had to do, and we slept in cars. We slept in people's couches. Now, mind y'all, 6 months pregnant. My baby boy, who will be 9 in September, was born into homelessness. And I love the city of Atlanta. I spent most of my adult life in DeKalb County. I'm from Cordell, Georgia, and yes, I want to move back to Atlanta for opportunity. But guess what? I couldn't afford it. The prices were too high. It was unaffordable. So guess where I went? Clayton County. So my senator, glad to see my senator is here. But we have to think outside of the box. I'm not saying encampments are the answer. Jail is definitely not the answer. But we got to hold our nonprofits accountable. We have to hold the city of Atlanta accountable because we know that's where this big problem is, the city of Atlanta. Let's be blunt. Now, yes, we have a mayor that I believe is going to do the right thing. He's always been very supportive. And I implore that for all of the communities. But sometimes in our nonprofit community, they don't like to hear this. And our state government doesn't like to hear this. When the money starts to get cut off, that's when things start happening. Now, I'm definitely not saying cut the money off. But in my opinion, when I read this bill, and I'm not for it all, trust me, that's not what I'm saying. But we have to hold our governments accountable, our local communities accountable, and these nonprofits that get the money accountable, even if it's Georgia Act, and we don't get any money, not from the government. But we have to hold ourselves accountable, and that's a tough conversation for us to have because we are doing great things, but sometimes our great things are not enough, and we have to, as the words of our mayor in the city of Atlanta, we have to color outside of the lines. So go and get Marshall Rancifer that goes out to the places where the homeless people really are at night while we're in the bed, warm, sleeping. Daryl Starks, who doesn't get any money, that goes out and finds housing for people. That's what we need. So definitely, again, as I close, the bill is not perfect. I'm not saying I'm for it, but I do agree with accountability. And is withholding money the answer? Probably not. But we got to do something different. And if you want to find out what will solve someone's homelessness, talk to someone who's homeless or has been homeless. Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you. We appreciate it. Oh, can you give us your name again for the record?
Yes, I'm Dr. Bambi Hayes Brown.
Dr. Bambi Hayes. What kind of doctor are you?
PhD in biblical studies and a doctor of theology.
Okay.
So
okay.
As soon as I leave here, I'm going to minister. I'm going to do it from the car. So I do a little encouraging word to a group of people every Thursday.
Good for you. Thank you for your encouraging words. Thank you. Appreciate it. Very good. All right, I see one more with a hand. Are you signed up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, your name?
Lynn McKeel.
Okay, we're just trying to make sure we've got them. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. And
It's been a very educational day so far. Thank you for your time. My name is Lynn McKeel. I'm a Georgia licensed attorney. I'm a DeKalb County resident. I'm a Georgia constituent, a Georgia voter. I'm here as an individual. And I also, I'm a volunteer, and I also donate to various nonprofits. So I'm actually here discussing Senate Bill 534. And I'm bringing this up because we heard a lot from a lot of nonprofits today. 534 has already passed, but I did want to at least be heard on it.
oh, this is on the charity. This this one.
We didn't take comments.
We did not. Okay, go ahead. Go
I'll
ahead.
be brief.
Okay.
I just would like to
Thank
share. I'm here in opposition of 534. Right now, charitable organizations are regulated by the Georgia Secretary of State's Charities Division, and Georgia is actually quite deregulated compared to the rest of the country. There's actually instances where charitable organizations have been kicked out and barred from other states, and then they come to Georgia because those illegal activities or those bad acts are actually legal here. So to register a nonprofit, it's quite simple. It's a $35 registration fee. It is $9.90. It is if you raise less than $500,000, it is an unaudited, unreviewed financial statement. And if you've raised no money, you don't have to provide any financial statements. Renewal is only every 2 years. When you renew, it's only $25. You can have a $20 million nonprofit come to Georgia and pay $35 or $25 every 2 years to be registered to solicit constant and uncapped financials. Excuse me. I just found out about this today, so I've been rushing to prepare notes. So we heard a lot from nonprofits today, and I would like to ask, what happens if we take the rules that are in the authority of the Secretary of State's office, put those rules into the authority of the legislature, and then as the bill is proposed, it says the legislature shall, when feasible, exempt charitable organizations from any and all requirements of the rules. So as the statute is currently written, the statute empowers the Secretary of State to adopt rules and regulations. These rules and regulations are subject to the Administrative Act, which requires a comment period, public notification. The division can and does often provide blast emails to all the nonprofits, allowing people to come in and comment on these rule changes, which there haven't been any. And from my understanding publicly, I don't think there will be any. So we're creating a new law telling that the legislature that they have to review these laws, and when they're reviewing the new laws, they have to go for the less burdened, less burdensome compliance, less burdensome reporting requirements, frequency requirements, etc. It prohibits the state of Georgia from increasing regulations on nonprofits. Of course, we don't want to regulate good actors. But we know, especially since COVID, that there's thousands of illegal actors, bad actors, fraudulent actors that can register, they can solicit donations, and if nobody files a complaint, if nobody does anything, there is no protection for the Georgia donors and the Georgia volunteers. With all due respect to Ms. Schmidt, she is from Tennessee. She mentioned that she represents 600 nonprofits, trusts, foundations, and religious organizations. So she's here lobbying on their behalf. Well, the Georgia Secretary of State's office does not regulate trusts, does not regulate foundations, and does not regulate religious organizations. And they also regulate over 12,000 registered charitable organizations within the state of Georgia. So I just would like to keep that in mind. It also puts burden on the legislature, because now the legislature has to do the background, the research, the time spent in adopting these rules.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say here as an individual that I'm in opposition of Senate Bill 534. There are already mechanisms in place. It's an unnecessary law, and the law doesn't help Georgia donors or Georgia nonprofits. It opens the floodgates.
Okay. You do have a question, so I'm going to...
Yes, ma'am. Would you say your name again, please?
Lynn McKeel.
Miss McKeel, I know you just found out about it today, and I appreciate that. Have you had a chance to speak to anyone in the Secretary of State's office?
I'm not in an official capacity.
I'm here. I'm the director of the division. We found that.
Okay, I don't want to get sideways with the chairman. So, I appreciate that. That was my question, because that does concern me.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it. Okay. Have we got anybody else that we've not got on? Do we have any others? I think that's it. Okay. We, Senator Summers, I told you we'd do a hearing. I'll let you do a closing remarks on you real quick.
Thank you kindly, committee. Thank you kindly, everybody. I know this is a very touchy subject. All I'm saying is we've got to start somewhere, and I greatly appreciate an unsolicited comment from Dr. Bambi Hayes to literally put it in perspective, what we're trying to do to literally make it better, and we got to start somewhere, and that's my point. Thank you,
Okay.
kindly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are dismissed. Thank you for your patience and for your flexibility. Wow.